Hello there, Andrew Colsky with Therapy BTS, Therapy Behind the Scenes, where we talk about all things therapy, and we're focusing on OCD today. Our guest is Joseph Ettinger, who is someone living with OCD and has taken matters in his own hands to help the community. So, Joseph, welcome, and can you briefly introduce yourself to the audience?
Well, hello, everybody. It is so nice to be here. I'm so honored to be on Therapy BTS. I met Andrew over LinkedIn and we had communicated back and forth for a little bit, and he invited me to be on this podcast. So I'm so happy to be here. I'm so honored, and I look forward to sharing a little bit about me, what living with OCD is like, and hopefully I'll be able to help some of you out there struggling with OCD. So, just to give you a little background into who I am. I'm
Mhm.
21 years old. I'm a student. I'm still a student at the University of Maryland. I'm studying computer science and finance, and I am also an entrepreneur and an individual with obsessive compulsive disorder. So I'm very involved in starting my own businesses, as we'll eventually get into today. We're going to be talking about an OCD community that I've started. But I just like, filling my time with things that help keep me busy, help keep the mind preoccupied. And yeah, so this is one of those things, and I'm so excited to share all this with you all today. So thank you for having me.
Sure, sure, fantastic. So let's dive into some of this. Why don't you give us the benefit of when did you first realize that you had something? Maybe you didn't even realize it was OCD yet, but what was your first uh, understandings that something might be going on, and kind of help us understand how things evolved to you eventually learning that you had OCD?
hmm Yeah, so it's actually a funny story. Well, a funny, not so funny story. It's funny looking back on it, but it happened in elementary school. And as a kid does, you like playing video games, you're in elementary school, so that means you're having story time and you're sitting at your desk and in math class and learning about all sorts of things. And for whatever reason, during elementary school, I just was incessantly making lists. So I'd have these yellow, green, blue post-it notes, writing things down all day, every day, things that I had to do, things that I had to get done in school, out of school. It was it was not too intense, but it started to become more and more intense with this list making, this need to write down my thoughts, which, as you'll learn about as the audience, I still do a lot to this day, is list making. So those were kind of the seeds being planted of some habits and some compulsions that would later come to fruition. So I would make these lists over and over again. Now, what was on these lists, you might ask? I mean, literally everything that felt I had to do. Take a shower, clean my room, I mean, it's really kind of funny, but play video games, eat dinner. I had to get through everything on my list. And then I started doing all sorts of things that were hyper organized. And I always say being OCD is not being organized. There's a huge difference between OCD and being organized. But a lot of these traits come through these sort of habits, which people can deem as just being highly organized or obsessive. So, for example, one thing I would do is I would lay out my outfits for every day of the week: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, every day of the week. And I would lay out my outfits and I would have a post-it note in front of them labeling the day of the week: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then I had an associated pre-made list for each one of those days with things that I knew I needed to do. So I had my pre-made lists of guaranteed things. And then I had blank post-it next to that for the potential things that could come up that I didn't expect. So things like this, the way I would play video games, it was very systematic. I had to go through everything, every side quest, get 100% completion, collect every item, earn every reward, full max completion. And that's just a small example of how I would live my life, even as an elementary school kid, right?
Mhm.
Systematically list making, obsessing, and being highly anxious and highly stressed while doing it. And eventually, I didn't know what this was, and I started talking to my mom and my dad. We ended up going to a doctor, and they told me that I had severe OCD, and we refused. I mean, I personally refused to believe it because, I mean, as a kid, I didn't even know what that meant. And my mom didn't want to make me feel bad. And so, being a prideful elementary school kid, I rejected it because I didn't want to be made fun of. I didn't want people to think different of me. So I rejected it and we left. And I didn't embrace it until years down the road. So that's a little context of how I found out some early habits and all of those seeds being planted in the early years of my life.
Hmm. So did you feel that at this stage of your life that the list making and all was interfering with your life at all, or was it just, oh, this is just what I have to do?
I felt it interfering when I felt the anguish of losing a list or forgetting what was on a list or not completing a list. Because if you read these lists, you would realize just how menial the tasks were,
Hmm.
being as though I was in elementary school. Literally as simple as go to soccer practice, finish my math homework, cut my nails, shower, go to, I mean, menial tasks. But I could start really feeling bad when I wouldn't finish these lists or when I would lose these lists. And I would be thinking about getting through my list items all day. I mean, I would be in class hanging out with my friends thinking about these lists,
Hmm.
thinking about what I needed to get done.
Right. So, you know, okay, you got to a point where you said initially your parents took you to see a doctor, they diagnosed OCD. Did your parents accommodate your OCD?
Yeah, so they at first they wanted to just listen to what I was feeling in the moment and they wanted to believe me for what I was telling them, face value.
Mhm.
I was telling them, "Oh, it's fine. It's not that big of a deal. I like making these lists. It's not a big deal. I don't even know what OCD is." I'm begging with them, pleading with them, don't make me do therapy. Don't make me get on medicine. And as parents and as being so loving and kind as they are, they listen to me. I mean, I feel pretty bad about it because I sort of put them in a really tough spot. I pretty much forced them to leave me alone with it for a little bit.
Mhm.
And eventually they just pushed me and put their foot down and made me get the help that I needed. But in the beginning I was prideful and stubborn.
Right, right. Well, you alluded to what my next question was going to be here, which is, so what was the turning point?
Mm. The turning point was actually not too long ago. So it was 2 summers ago. And 2 summers ago, I was working at an internship and I was on a new medication, sometimes, and this isn't the case for everybody, but a lot of times medication is a fit process. So it's finding the best fit for you. And at the time, I was on a medication that was not a great fit for me.
Hmm.
Um, and it was early on, so it was more of a trial run and not a great fit. And I was extremely tired and groggy the way it was interacting with my body. I was just extremely tired and groggy, and it wasn't helping with the thoughts. And I felt like I could hardly keep my eyes open during work. I felt like I could barely stay awake and I could barely focus. My mind was like a clouded something. I couldn't even think straight. And I was tired, and the obsessions and the compulsions, they wouldn't stop. And I was doing worse at my internship. And I was just thinking to myself, I can't do this anymore. I either need to find a different medication, do therapy, figure it out. And that was the turning point. And that's when I started really taking action.
Hmm. So throughout this time from elementary school up until the point you're describing, was list making the primary issue, or were there other types of obsessions?
Yeah, so I always like to sort of I learned this actually in therapy. The way, and this will probably help audience members who might not know this, but what I've been told is obsessive compulsive disorder, there are two parts to this, the obsessions and the compulsions. That's what we've learned. The obsessions come in the form of these relentless, intrusive thoughts that you can't get out of your head. And the compulsions we're seeing are responses to these thoughts. So habits, rituals, acts that you use to alleviate the distress of the obsessions. It's
Hmm.
this yin and yang. And for me, that means, and to paint this sort of picture, the obsessions, there was a realm of obsessions and a realm of compulsions. So the realm of the obsessions were catastrophic what if scenarios. So anything you could imagine, anything you could imagine, starting with a what if question related to some sort of catastrophe, whether it be, death, unfortunately, or loss, financial loss, loss of a loved one, failure in school, failure in work, failure in job. All of it started with a what if. What if I crash? What if I fail? What if I lose this money? What if, what if, what if? And the compulsions, my responses to those obsessive thoughts were primarily list making, but there were a few others. There was list making, there was reassurance photo taking, and there was checking, a lot of checking habits. So the list making, I would write down the worries on a list. And funny enough, before I deleted the list, tens of thousands of items over the years. I'm not even kidding, tens of thousands. I would write down the worry, and oftentimes I would accompany it by writing down my thoughts, arguing the worry, arguing against the worry, trying to convince myself in writing why I was safe, why I was okay, why I wouldn't have failed. It's called reassurance seeking. And I would seek reassurance with myself. I would ask people to give me, hey, would this have happened? Would this have happened? Google searches all day. Would this have happened? Would this have happened? What would have happened if this was a different situation?
Hmm.
Reassurance, reassurance. And then the photo taking. I felt like I would have to, and I, am working. I've made a lot of progress, but in the prime of it, the photo taking, the reassurance photo taking, am I where I need to be? Is my seatbelt on? Let me take a sly little photo, as evidence to prove to myself that this is true, that I am safe. Taking a selfie with my seatbelt on when I get in the car. Okay, my seatbelt's on. Boom, boom. Yep, my seatbelt's on. Walking around. Okay, I'm in where I think I am. And then checking. These are actually pretty common. A lot of people with these checking locks, checking that the microwave is off or the stove is off, checking that, certain things are unplugged when you go out of town, checking this, checking that, checking your seatbelt, click, click. So these compulsions, they're always responses to an underlying fear or an underlying intrusive thought. So that's pretty much the existence from late elementary school through where I am now.
Wow. Okay. So I'm going to assume that maybe when you were in school at any point along the line, did your teachers have any issues with anything that you might have been doing in the classroom?
No,
Hmm.
no, because no one knows. OCD is often referred to as an invisible disorder because it really is invisible. I mean, I had friends. I still am in a wonderful social environment where, I'm able to function socially perfectly fine. And I do well in school, right? I was a good student. I had a good relationship with my students. Nobody knew. It was invisible. I mean, nobody knew.
Right. Wow. So at what point did you seek treatment and what did that look like?
So 2 summers ago, when I really had that pivotal moment at my job, I was just I I was talking with my mom about what to do nearly every day. Nearly every day we were trying to figure out what was next. And what ended up happening is we did what's referred to as exposure response therapy, and that's a form of cognitive behavioral therapy. And we did it through an organization called NoCD.
Mhm.
And NoCD is, I believe, to be the largest virtual therapy provider for people with obsessive compulsive disorder. And they were wonderful. And so I did, I mean, it's very challenging. It's very rewarding, but it's very challenging. Exposure response therapy, as you can tell from the name, exposes you to what it is you're so afraid of by helping you and giving you tools to respond to thoughts differently, to expose yourself to discomfort, to expose yourself to uncertainty, to doubt. So I did therapy. And I actually, interestingly enough, and this is not advice that I would recommend, right? I'm not a doctor, I'm not a professional, but I actually got off my medicine to do the therapy because I wanted to isolate the thoughts and I wanted to attack it in the purest form.
Mhm.
I wanted to approach therapy in the purest form because I wanted to see how far I could get without medication and then see if medication could take me the extra distance if I needed it. Now, again, I want to reiterate that is not me telling any of the viewers on this podcast to get off medication. You should always obviously consult with a doctor. You should always listen to a professional. This is just my personal experience.
Mhm.
I got off the medication and I did therapy. And that was sort of the pivotal life-changing moment.
So from the time that you started therapy, how long did it take before you recognized any sort of difference?
You know, I started recognizing a difference immediately. And I say that because I don't mean that immediately the thoughts were easier to deal with or immediately the compulsions were less. When I say immediately, I mean I didn't even understand what OCD was. Truly. I mean, all of the thoughts, all of my response mechanisms were up until that point were feeding it. I was doing what was wrong because I didn't actually understand it at all. I
Mhm.
didn't understand the disorder. I didn't understand how it operates. Up until that point, I had actually been doing everything wrong because I didn't know. So by immediately, what I mean is that within a day, within a couple days, within a week, within 2 weeks, I I understood the disorder. I learned what OCD actually was and how it actually operates. I understood, I learned, I felt like the blind had been lifted over my eyes.
Mhm.
So over the next several months, that's when the obsessions and compulsions themselves got better. That's when I had the skills to get better. But by immediately, I mean I just learned what it actually was. I understood what I was doing wrong. And for a lot of people out there, that's going to probably be the case when you start therapy. The truth is, for those of you that haven't done therapy yet or don't really know that much about OCD, you probably have some misconceptions about what it is and how it operates, you know? There's probably a lot of information that would change your perspective.
So for someone who has not experienced any sort of therapy, can you describe sort of the pain threshold, meaning like how hard was it to participate in therapy? Was it relatively easy? Did you have some internal struggles going on? What was it like for you?
So I have to be honest. I can't lie about something like this.
Hmm.
Therapy is challenging, especially therapy for OCD,
Hmm.
because therapy for OCD is not talk therapy. You don't go to therapy with the intention of talking about things that you don't get to talk about, or it's a different kind of therapy. exposure response therapy in particular, and there are other kinds of therapies. I did exposure response therapy. I'll probably eventually try another kind. But I did exposure response therapy, and it is challenging. It's challenging because even in the name, exposure response prevention, exposure response prevention therapy, you have to expose yourself to the uncertainty of your thoughts. You have to expose yourself to the doubt, and you have to change your response. So what I mean by that is the compulsions are what keep the obsessions coming. Every time you do a compulsion, you're losing the battle to your OCD. Not losing, I guess that's a harsh word, but when you give in to the compulsion, you're telling your OCD that it was right, that your obsession was somewhat valid, and that the only way to alleviate any distress, the only way to feel free is that you have to do the compulsion. And that's what it's telling you. That's what these thoughts are telling you, that you have to do these compulsions. And what exposure response prevention therapy does is it tells you, no, you don't. You don't have to do the compulsions, that you're separate from your OCD, that your OCD is not necessarily you, that it's a different voice. And that voice might be telling you to do these compulsions, but you don't need to. And you have to work hard, to respond differently so that you're not engaging in these compulsions. And so the basis of exposure response prevention therapy is that if you can reduce the compulsions, you're starving the obsessions. You're not giving the obsessions the food, the fuel that they need by, as they would say, imagine having a tiger in a cage. Every time you throw the steak or a piece of meat to the tiger, he's going to expect the meat to come from you next time. He's going to expect of you to keep throwing him a steak, to keep feeding it, to keep feeding the obsession. But what happens when you stop feeding the tiger? Well, the tiger at first gets hungry, and then the tiger gets really hungry, and then the tiger is starving, and then the tiger is dead. So what do we mean by this? Exposure ERP therapy takes the framework that by starving the compulsions, by not feeding the compulsions, you will eventually starve the obsessions, bringing down the level of stress, the anxiety, the level of obsession, the level of compulsion. And ultimately, by focusing on responding differently, reducing the compulsions, you will in turn reduce the obsessions. And this is challenging because compulsions are called compulsions for a reason. Compulsions aren't habits necessarily, they're more than habits. Compulsions aren't just things you feel like you need to do. They're things you feel like you need to do with an emphasis. They're things that you feel you don't even have control over because it's almost like the word describes, a compulsion. It's compulsive. So it is challenging and it is painful. And what I would say to people is to not let that dissuade you. Because what's more painful? Living with the OCD or dealing with it and dealing with the pain that treatment might bring along with it. And my answer every day is that the pain of living with OCD and not knowing what to do and not seeing a future and not seeing where this is going to go and the hope, that's far worse of a pain to be dealing with than the pain of jumping into some therapy and exposing yourself to the doubt.
Right, right. So tell me this then. If we say, let's set a baseline. Let's say 0 is before you got any sort of help, no treatment, right? And then 100 would be you are at the place that you want to be with your OCD. Where would you say you are right now?
You know what? I would say that I'm about from 0 to 100, 100 being exactly where I want to be. I would say I'm about a 70.
Okay.
about a 70. And I did therapy for about 3 months. That's it.
Okay. And you're
3 months.
not on medication? It's just the
I'm not
therapy?
on medication. I'm not on medication anymore. No medication since I got off for therapy and all that. I haven't been back on. And I'm about a 70. And as many people say, therapy is different for different people, you know, you move at different speeds. I sort of fluctuate from a 70 to like a 60 to 70, 60 to 70.
Hmm.
I consider that a huge, huge step forward from 3 months of therapy
Sure.
because, I'll do a couple more months of therapy, a couple more rounds of therapy over the next probably couple years of my life, and I'll keep moving forward. And I'm excited to get that to an 80 to 100 eventually.
Hmm.
But what I sort of like to, give people the idea is that once you do therapy, once you start therapy, therapy can really be with you every day of your life moving forward. Because you don't just talk, like I said, for OCD therapy, you're learning skills, you're learning response mechanisms. So once you learn those and once you understand OCD, therapy is with you every day because you can practice these skills each and every day. You can practice your therapy every day.
Hmm.
You can look into the resources that these therapists and these organizations can provide for you. So it's with you every day. And, I try to work on it every day, but it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. But, you know, at the same time, by doing the work, you're making tremendous progress. And that's,
Exactly.
and that's a point that, I make quite often to people is that while the therapy itself can seem like it's going to be stressful and is stressful, the beauty of OCD therapy is that it doesn't take that long to start to see changes. And here you are saying 3 months, you went from 0 to 70.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's the good point. And the skills that you learn and the progress that you make stays with you. So you just
Hmm.
continue to build and build. You're never going to forget those skills or lose those skills. You may have a flare up somewhere down the road, but you'll immediately know what's going on and how to address it. So,
Exactly.
this is the good part of OCD therapy is that you can make progress. And in your case, there's many people who don't need medications. There's some who benefit from medication, and there's
Of
many who
course.
um, so I want to talk a little bit about something else that you've done in relation to OCD. And I'm going to share my screen here because I want to give you an opportunity to explain this new venture of yours. So give me 1 second. And um, okay, so tell us about what we're looking at.
So what you see on front of you, on the screen here in front of you, is the OCD Advantage. The OCD Advantage is a community that I started about a month and a half ago. And what this is it's an online community space that fills the gaps, certain gaps in the OCD recovery process on a broad scale. It fixes some problems that exist within OCD recovery. Now, what do I mean by that? There are two or three sort of pillars of OCD recovery. There's therapy, there's medication, and then there's resources and general guidance from organizations, professionals, etc. So you have something like exposure response therapy, you take a medication that your doctor prescribes you, and then you might read some articles, watch some videos, listen to some podcasts like this, for example, great resources out there, right? These are the kinds of resources that sort of complement the OCD recovery. But there's a fourth pillar. There's a fourth pillar, a rather underserved, underappreciated, underrepresented pillar. And do you know what that pillar is? That pillar is community. That pillar is friendship. That pillar is communication on a daily basis and conversation, open dialogue. It's authentic friendship. There's a loneliness that plagues people with OCD. Now, I'm blessed to have people to talk to. I'm blessed to have had family to talk to. I'm blessed to be able to not have been so lonely with my OCD. But there are people out there that have no one to talk to, that have no friends to share these thoughts with, that, as horrific as it might seem, might not have a supportive family member that it can talk to. It breaks my heart. But loneliness plagues people with an already isolating disorder. Already isolating it is to have OCD. And to not have anyone to talk to on a regular basis besides your therapist or besides the pill that you're taking or besides an article or a video is a detriment. And so I started this community, and we've grown to 202 members, as you can see on the screen. We've grown to 202 members. And what we're seeing is that it takes an approach that complements therapy, complements medication, and complements resources. We are not trying to draw people away from those. In fact, we're trying to help point people in the right direction, to give them hope, give them an idea of where they can get help in those three other pillars. We're not trying to draw them away from these three other pillars. We're just trying to introduce the fourth pillar to complement the three other pillars. The fourth pillar is in 5 words, can be reiterated in 5 words: authentic friendship and genuine community. Authentic friendship and genuine community. That's the fourth pillar. And that's what I'm building here. And it's on a platform that provides a thread for people to talk. And we're seeing real human interaction, conversations, back and forth, real in-depth conversations. We're seeing people are excited. They're loving this community. They're excited to see where it goes. We're seeing that we're fulfilling the goal that I've said we're going to fulfill from the beginning, which is authentic friendship and genuine community. And, I have sort of lessons coming out via these courses almost. I have, and these aren't, it's not professional or medical advice because I'm not a professional. It's lessons and stories about my life. It's stories, it's things that I've been through, it's lessons that I've learned from that. It's talking points, things to bring up in the community. And then, there's a feature where we're going to start having virtual meetups for people to get to know each other, have conversations, talk about things in a more lively environment via Zoom. And, we're doing a lot of great work to get it out there. We're joining podcasts like this, for example. We're scheduled to be in some magazines. We're partnering with organizations. We're hopefully partnering with colleges and schools. We're doing social media work. I mean, we're doing everything we can to get this out there because I don't believe this to just be a support group. I don't believe this community to be just one resource for a small group of people. No, I think the OCD Advantage, is the fourth pillar of OCD recovery.
Mhm.
Fourth pillar of OCD recovery. And it's different. It's different than other things that are out there. A lot of support groups are wonderful, but they only meet once or twice a month. Where are people to go in between then?
Mhm.
There are threads and groups online, but people aren't responding. People aren't responding too much. I mean, you might get a response or two, but where are you developing the relationship with the person that responds? There's no follow-up. There's no getting to know each other. There's no level of personal relationship development. We're changing that. We're building authentic friendship, long-lasting friendship, genuine community. And that's this project.
So let me ask, and if someone is listening to this and they're considering joining, are there any limitations on terms of country, in terms of age, in terms of gender, in terms of sexual orientation? Are there any limitations as to who can be in the group?
Nope. No limitations. No limitations. You can come from any country, from any background. In fact, to give you a little tidbit of information to support that, we have people from South America, from Italy, from Slovenia. We have a lady from an Eastern European country who said, you know, there's very little mental health care over in this country. Very little mental health care. And this community has already been one of the best resources I've ever had. So it's for everybody. It's for everybody, regardless of where you're from or what you do or
Mhm.
who you are. And we're bringing in people from around the world.
That's fantastic. I think you're right that this is a piece of the puzzle that has been missing, and I'm glad you're doing this. Let me ask this though. Um, so when someone is in this community, that there's other online communities out there that I have looked at,
Yeah.
and some of the other online communities that are more sort of social media based are I ban my patients from going to them because they are people who are feeding each other's obsessions and they are
Mm,
making each other worse. And
mhm.
it's like a toxic pool of OCD obsessive behavior. And
Yep. Yep.
um,
That can happen.
yeah, I mean, so how do you prevent that from happening in your group?
Right. So we're very aware of that. We actually have not faced that. We have not faced that as a problem. And you know why? Because I don't just this see, I've thought about these problems.
Mhm.
If this is the case, then my community needs to be different, right? That's the fundamental principle. If all of these other communities are lacking authentic friendship and genuine, behavior, and they're also feeding other people's obsessions by doing probably what you're talking about most commonly is reassurance seeking, people seeking for reassurance and going back and forth. Am I going to be okay? Am I, how do we solve that problem? Well, we do solve the problem. We do solve the problem in the OCD advantage, and we solve it by bringing in a diverse perspective or a diverse set of perspectives for people in the OCD space. We don't just bring in people that suffer with OCD. No, we bring in people that are adjacent to OCD, people that study OCD, doctors, therapists, professionals. We bring in the whole bag. We bring in the whole bag. So it has sufferers, doctors, therapists, researchers, students of psychology, students of psychiatry, all coming together. And so when you have that, and now these people, they are not the individual's doctor, you should always consult with your own personal doctor. But these are still professional, experienced, individuals with wisdom and knowledge to share.
Mhm.
And we're seeing that these perspectives are coming together beautifully because you might have someone suffering and you might have someone experienced with OCD to just have a conversation with them to not feed their reassurance seeking. Or better yet, you might have a 20-year veteran therapist who says, "Hey, look, I'm not your doctor, I'm not your therapist, but as an experienced professional, what you're describing is this. And what is known to be a good response to this is this. And how you should approach, and here's an article, here's a video to support this." And we're seeing that there is no reassurance seeking. There is just open, honest, and vulnerable dialogue and conversation. But we've solved the problem. We've really solved the problem. People are not feeding the negative aspects of each other's OCD. They're feeding the positive aspects. That this is something that brings us together. That this is something that can have positive impacts on your life. It's incredible. I mean, I'm biased, obviously, as the founder of the community, but this is what I've set out from the beginning.
Mhm.
You don't solve the problem by doing what everyone else has done. You solve the problem by doing what nobody else has done. And this is what nobody else has been doing. Nobody else has been prioritizing genuine, authentic friendship, long-lasting friendship for people to really get to know each other. Very few people have been considering targeting and emailing these professionals and putting in the work to invite them in to join this diverse group of perspectives, you know? And so we're solving that problem. But that's a great point you bring up because I see it all the time. I see it all the time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is really wonderful that you know have done this, and I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I know a couple people that I'm going to refer over because they're looking for that additional type of support. And this sounds like a great place for them to be able to get that. That's going to be helpful as opposed to some of the things that I was talking about that are not helpful.
Correct. Thank you so
So
much for referring them,
yeah,
by the way. I hope they love it.
yeah, well, I certainly, we'll make sure that they're aware of it. Um, so we're running up against time here. So I want to thank you for taking the time to share your own story and then for taking the time to build this new community. It seems like it's a great, like I said, a great piece of the puzzle, and I'm happy to support it and to support what you're doing. Um, any final thoughts for someone who's listening to this podcast who thinks they might have OCD, but they don't know what to do?
Final thoughts for you. If you're listening to this and you're struggling with obsessive compulsive disorder and you can't, and you don't necessarily see a future that's free of obsession, and you don't necessarily see a future that's free of compulsion, here's an answer for you. There was a time not too long ago where I didn't want to leave my room, where I didn't want to hang out with my friends, where I didn't want to do the things that I loved, like go to the gym or work on these projects, because I was stricken, bogged down by these thoughts and compulsions. If that's you, if you're in a similar position, you are going to be okay if you are willing to take the steps to get there. The world, and this might come off as harsh or it might come off as assertive, but this is the truth about obsessive compulsive disorder. You have to fight for yourself. You have to put in the work to get to where you need to be, to achieve the potential that you have as someone with obsessive compulsive disorder who can make incredible things come from their life. The responsibility is yours. And that should be empowering. You should feel empowered. This is my battle. I'm going to conquer this and then I'm going to reap the rewards of having controlled this disorder and leveraged it for greatness. There is hope. There are resources. There is a future in which this disorder is something that you would choose to have with you if given the choice. Now, this is my advice. For therapy, I would recommend an organization like an OCD or a therapist that you know and trust, like, for example, you and your clients. It doesn't matter. You could go to an OCD, you could find a therapist, but consider therapy. Think about exposure response prevention therapy. Check out the other kinds of therapies. I don't know too much about them, so I'm not going to speak on them, but check out and consider therapy. There's no shame. And if it's a it's something that fears you financially, there are cheaper options. There are cheaper options than other options, and there's insurance, and there are some solutions, and there are some scholarships, and do the work, do the research, figure out how you can get help, you know, for medications, right? Let's go through the 4 pillars. For therapy, like I just said, do all that stuff, do the research, do the work. For medications, do some online research, consult with a doctor. Don't be afraid of your doctor. Be honest, be vulnerable, tell them everything they need to know, tell them your thoughts, tell them your feelings. See if there is a medication for you to try, but talk to a professional. Get the conversation started. Ask about potential medications. Don't let the stigma around medication prevent you. Medication can be a beautiful resource. And I encourage you to talk to your doctor and to see if there's any medications for you. Those are the first 2 pillars, therapy and medication. The third pillar, general guidance, resource sharing. Again, put in the work, do the research, listen to podcasts like these, watch videos, partner with organizations, ask questions, email people, read forums, watch videos, read articles, do the research, put in the work. And fourth and finally, join the OCD Advantage. Build friendship, authentic friendship, long-lasting friendship, and genuine community. Those are the 4 pillars, in my opinion. The fourth one, obviously a little biased. Maybe join a support group, maybe join another group, maybe join a Facebook group, but ultimately join the OCD Advantage.
Great.
Those are the 4 pillars.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We're out of time for today, but I'm so glad that you were able to share all of this. I really appreciate the work that you're doing. And, together let's work on building all of those pillars that you just described and, get people the help that they need and that they want.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much.